So I just finished rewatching Yu Yu Hakusho, and I gotta say, unfortunately, it does not hold up. Now you gotta consider why I have such great memories of this anime in the first place. It was the second shonen anime I'd ever seen, the first one being Dragon Ball Z, and of course never having seen something quite like it before, naturally I thought it was amazing. And then you gotta consider, like, this was before I'd even watched anime online, right? This was on the original Adult Swim anime lineup as the lead-off show. So that's like the kind of place it has in my memories. And naturally, when it comes on TV, such a long show, I missed a lot of episodes. So I decided that rather than watching it on TV, I would try to watch it online. But unfortunately, I was stuck with some of the absolute worst subtitles I have ever come across. Sometimes I make inside jokes on my website that only I would understand. And one of these inside jokes is a quote from one of these really terrible subtitles. Kuwabara is running down the street with Yusuke, and he's asking Yusuke, "Hey man, what's this thing that you can only talk to me about and that you can't talk to Keiko about? Are you going to go buy a female erotica magazine?" And man, I still have not forgotten that quote to this day, how awful that translation was. And then there was a whole series of subtitles that I watched during the Dark Tournament arc in particular, where they would always mix up the names of Hiei and Kurama. It was mind-boggling that why would they make this mistake? And my theory was that for some reason in another country perhaps, they weren't working off the Japanese dub, maybe they were working off like a Chinese dub or something, where they actually did mix up the names for some reason. But yeah, these subtitles were just awful. This time around, I watched the show mainly without subtitles, but I would flip on the subtitles on Crunchyroll if there was something I didn't understand. So I was able to get a much better grasp of the show this time around. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy the show quite as much. Now, even back in the day, I did notice the major problem with the show. As you get farther and farther towards the end, as you go longer and longer into the show, the power level structure goes completely out of whack. But this time around, even knowing that would happen, that was not the biggest problem for me. The biggest problem for me is that many of the fights were just simply boring, especially Yusuke's. This is the kind of show, and you see this in other anime too, but Yu Yu Hakusho is especially guilty of this. You'll have a fight where the main character, one of the good guys, will just take hit after hit after hit, and the damage should, in theory, be piling up and wearing them down, but they just kind of shrug it off as if it never happened, and then somehow they're able to just beat the enemy with one little trick or one quick blow. For example, they might be inspired by heartbreak or emotional loss, or they'll see their friend getting hit in front of them, or they'll remember the reasons they're fighting, and then suddenly some switch will flip inside their head, they'll power up, and then they'll just get one really good hit on the enemy. That's really boring, especially by today's standards when we see so many different shonen anime that have done so many more creative things. Hiei and Kurama's fights, they're a little bit more interesting, but Kuwabara and Yusuke's fights, they are fairly boring and gimmicky by today's standards. Something else that I kind of noticed by today's standards, man, Koenma, he is such a bitch. He made so many bad jokes, especially during and before the Dark Tournament arc. He's just sitting in his office or sitting in like the bleachers, watching the fights, and he's just cracking all these terrible jokes left and right. I probably did not find them funny by any stretch of the imagination back in the day, but I certainly don't remember them being this bad or this frequent or this simply annoying. So there's that as well. The Dark Tournament arc, which I remembered as being like the highlight of the show, the most badass arc of the show, just wasn't that good this time around. Especially like there was one fight, it felt really slow. There was one series of fights in the middle where they're fighting against the possessed guys, and I'm just like, come on, when's this going to be over? Just hurry up and get it over with. Really the most interesting thing about that fight was that they were at like a two-man disadvantage, and that Hiei and the masked warrior, I don't know if they revealed her at that time, but yeah, they're just sitting on the sidelines because they can't participate in the fight. But yeah, that part was really slow. And yeah, Yusuke and Kurama's and Kuwabara's fights were particularly kind of uncreative and boring. Yeah, so that was fairly disappointing. But one of the cool things about this rewatch is that I was able to watch like I forget what the English word for their powers were, but like the telekinetics arc. And during that arc, you can see Togashi laying the foundation for a lot of the powers he's going to try to develop in Hunter x Hunter, which it's a much, much better show, and I certainly recommend it. It's probably the best shonen anime out there. And another thing that I completely missed the first time around, probably because of the terrible subtitles, is that there was a really long-running gag that they finally revealed in like the second to last episode. I am a complete sucker for these kinds of series-long gags that are revealed at the very end. Doesn't happen that often. Maybe I'll do a post about it someday, about some of the ones that I remember in particular. But god damn it, even though it's not that good towards the end, great joke. And even towards the end, actually, it had some good character development at the very least. That's some of the redeeming features of the final arc in the Demon World. But overall, I gotta say, this show does not stand the test of time. Still like it, still give it a single plus, but not nearly as good as I remember it. Probably not nearly as good as you remember it either.